Tonight, we will drift back through time to a period when the streets were quiet not from peace, but from dread, when the air was thick with smoke and suspicion, and when a figure in a long black coat, masked and gloved, became both a symbol of hope and a harbinger of death. This is the story of the Plague Doctor, not the dramatic version you might see in dark fiction or Halloween costumes, but the steady, quiet truth behind the beaked mask. We won't hurry through battles or loud events tonight. Instead, we'll walk slowly through a city half asleep with illness, listen to the hush of forgotten alleyways, and step into the life of someone who was both needed and feared. Let the past settle over you like the weight of a heavy cloak. Let your breathing match the slow rhythm of the narration, and gently, without effort, begin your journey back to a world that no longer exists. Leather mask, empty wallet, the life of a hired healer. Imagine yourself waking before dawn in a cramped, creaking room above a vacant apothecary. The sun has not yet pierced the fog that coils low over the rooftops. Your breath curls in the chilly air, and you pull a thin wool cloak around your shoulders, though it does little to warm you. As a plague doctor, your tools are simple, and your authority is ambiguous. You're not a surgeon, nor a priest, nor even a well-respected scholar. You are a hired figure, often chosen less for skill than for willingness. The city needs someone to face the sick, and you are that someone. In the corner of your room, the leather mask waits. Its long curved beak is stuffed with herbs, lavender, mint, and sometimes vinegar-soaked cloth, meant to ward off the miasma, the foul air thought to spread disease. The eye holes are covered with glass, giving you a detached, insect-like vision of the world. It is uncomfortable, hot, and hard to see through. But it is your armour. Your gloves are cracked. Your coat, coated in wax, makes a stiff rustling as you move. Before stepping outside, you clutch a wooden cane, not to lean on, but to prod, to point, to test the breathing of someone lying motionless. The streets are quiet. Most shops are shuttered. Occasionally you pass another soul, a mother pulling a child away, a baker setting out bread with trembling hands, a city guard with a cloth tied across his mouth. No one greets you. Some look away. Others mutter prayers. You arrive at your first home of the day. A black mark is drawn on the door. The air smells of vinegar and damp wood. Inside, the family sits silently. One child coughs. An old woman lies on a straw pallet, her breathing shallow, her eyes distant. You don't speak much. You observe. You write down symptoms in a journal. Boils, fever, hallucinations. You leave a sachet of herbs by the window. You recommend isolation. The family asks questions you can't answer. Will she live? Should we burn her bedding? Can we touch her? You don't know, and they know you don't know. By midday, the mask grows stifling. You remove it in an alleyway, wiping your face with a linen cloth. The stink of rot is everywhere. You eat a piece of dry bread. You think about your payment, small and likely delayed. Cities often hired plague doctors on short contracts, with promises of lodging or coin that might never come. Many died before collecting a wage. In the evening, you stop by the city records office. You list names, you record deaths. You try not to recall faces. Another day closes with a faint hope that you're not already infected. Before sleep, you write a final note in your journal. Not for others, for yourself. To remember that you were here, that you tried, that you walked into rooms others fled. Sleep comes slowly. The silence is never complete. Somewhere in the city a bell tolls. A real case study, Venice's last plague doctor. Now that we've walked through the daily rhythms of a plague doctor's life, the discomfort, the routine, the isolation, let us gently shift our focus toward one real individual whose life and service during the plague in Venice gives us a more personal lens into this strange profession. Imagine yourself standing near the canals of 17th century Venice. The year is 1630. A thick mist rises from the water, softening the edges of the crumbling palazzos. The air smells faintly of salt, damp wood, and, if you're close enough to one of the lazarettos, a decay masked with herbs. In this heavy quiet, a man moves purposefully through narrow alleys. His name was Doctor Girolamo Mercuriale, though in some records he's referred to simply as Il Dottore della Peste, the Doctor of the Plague. Venice, at the time, was under siege, not by a foreign army but by an invisible force. The plague had returned, and the city, with its crowded streets and stagnant canals, was fertile ground. The Senate issued strict public health decrees. Gondolas became fewer, markets fell silent. People avoided each other's eyes. Girolamo was appointed as the official plague doctor for one of the city's quarantine islands, Lazaretto Vecchio. This was not a glamorous assignment. While some imagined plague doctors as distant mystical figures, Girolamo lived on the edge of the city's fears. Each morning he would rise, prepare his outfit, the waxed robes, the glass spectacles, the heavy gloves, and make his rounds among the infected. His role was not just medical, but administrative, counting bodies, keeping ledgers, ensuring isolation, and always trying to maintain distance. There are surviving fragments of his correspondence, dry, formal, and full of subtle grief. In one, he reports that over 100 people perished in a single week within his care. Another letter gently requests more supplies, more vinegar for cleansing, more herbs to stuff in masks, more bandages. But nowhere does he ask for help for himself. Like many in his position, he accepted a silent burden. What makes Girolamo's story unusual is not his fame or his methods, but the tenure of his service. While many plague doctors served briefly, often fleeing once disease broke containment, Girolamo remained for months. He slept near the sick. He obeyed quarantine laws. He watched the city across the lagoon flicker with torchlight and silence. And when the outbreak finally waned, he quietly faded from history. No statue marks his name, no detailed biography exists, but in the dusty records of the Venetian Senate his presence remains, as a calm hand during chaos. As you imagine his slow walks along the stone corridors of the Lazaretto, the quiet rustle of robes, the distant sound of bells tolling, let yourself feel the weight of service in a time when hope was thin. There is a kind of peace in accepting one's role, even when the world is crumbling. For Girolamo, that meant being the last to leave the island, and the first to return if ever called again. Now, as we transition to the next segment, let us move from this quiet tale of one man to the strange and fascinating objects that defined his profession. Strange cures and bird-like suits, symbolism of the tools. Let us now turn our gaze to the artifacts themselves, the tools of the plague doctor, the long beak, the black robe, the strange talismans and bitter-smelling mixtures. These items have passed into folklore and costume, their meanings distorted by time. But in their origin, each carried purpose and fear. Imagine a dim room, the walls damp with the breath of the sea, a wooden table, laid out upon it, gloves of stiff leather, a staff polished smooth with use, a vial of crushed rose petals, and, at the centre, a curved mask like the face of some silent bird. The beak-shaped mask is perhaps the most iconic symbol of the plague doctor. It was not intended to frighten, though it certainly did. Rather, it was a filter. The beak was often stuffed with a mixture of herbs, mint, cloves, cinnamon, lavender, and camphor. Sometimes, vinegar-soaked sponges were added to the mix. The theory was miasma, bad air, caused disease. The scent of the herbs was meant to purify the air as the doctor breathed in. Of course, it did nothing to halt the plague, but it gave a sense of control, of ritual. The long black overcoat was made of waxed canvas or leather, designed to keep bodily fluids from soaking through. Heavy gloves, thick boots, glass lenses over the eyes, a wide-brimmed hat to signify their profession, and always a staff, not merely to walk with, but to maintain distance, to point, to lift bedclothes, to fend off the desperate without touch. Some doctors carried small amulets, religious tokens, fragments of saints' bones, charms etched with protective symbols. Others kept posies or sweet bags in their pockets to press to their nose. There was something almost priestly in the way these items were used, a ritual dressing like a form of armour, both spiritual and physical. The cures they offered were stranger still. Some instructed patients to drink crushed emeralds mixed with wine. Others believed in bleeding, or in rubbing onions or dead pigeons onto the sores. One method involved sitting between two blazing fires to burn out the infection. Many of these treatments were not just ineffective, but harmful, yet they were prescribed in earnest. Because doing something, even something odd, offered comfort in chaos. There was symbolism in every detail. The bird-like shape was not just functional, it mirrored ideas of transformation, of spiritual passage. In some regions, ravens and storks were seen as intermediaries between the living and the dead. The beak gave the doctor a spectral presence, as though they were no longer fully human. Perhaps this made it easier, for the sick, for the grieving, to look into that mask and see not a man, but a ritual figure, neither wholly among the living nor the dead, Over time, the image became myth. In later centuries, the costume was parodied in theatre, in paintings, in festivals. But in its original context, it was a grim uniform, worn by those who walked through silence, through filth, through fear, and tried, in their way, to help. Now, as the candlelight fades in our imagined room and the scent of lavender mingles with old wood, we move on to the final segment, a shift in class, in comfort, in choices. Let us now explore how the elite, when faced with the same invisible threat, chose to respond, not with masks and staffs, but with walls, isolation, and opulence. Nobles who hid, the elite in quarantine, while plague doctors braved alleyways thick with rot, and peasants buried loved ones with their own blistered hands, another class chose a different response. The nobles, the wealthy, those who had the means to step aside from the tide of suffering. Imagine a countryside estate far from the infected city walls, stone walls thick with ivy, a grand iron gate, and behind it, silence. Horses idle in the stables, servants pass quietly through long halls. The plague is elsewhere for now, but its shadow still creeps in the corners. When the plague reached a city, many nobles fled. Retreating to country manors or remote villas, they enacted a form of early quarantine, not for all, but for themselves. They took with them food, family, and favoured servants, isolating in comfort while the cities roiled in sickness. In Florence, during the Black Death of 1348, Giovanni Boccaccio described a group of wealthy young nobles who retreated to a secluded villa, where they passed the days with music, storytelling, and feasting. His book, The Decameron, captures both the absurdity and the truth, that while some suffered, others escaped. Their version of quarantine was indulgent. There were clean linens, scented oils, and plenty of wine. Fireplaces burned through the night, not just for warmth, but to keep away bad air. Walls were whitewashed, rooms fumigated with burning rosemary and thyme, windows were kept shuttered, letters were aired out before being opened, or simply burned unread. But even in seclusion, fear lingered. The rules were rigid. Servants who left were not allowed back in. Deliveries were left at the edge of the estate. News from the outside came slowly, if at all. If someone inside the estate fell ill, decisions had to be made quickly and coldly. Often they were simply removed, quietly, without farewell. Some nobles turned to alchemical remedies or hired private physicians, not the beaked mask of the public doctor, but men with better instruments, more privacy, and deeper discretion. Others clung to religion, constructing private chapels and offering generous donations to the church, as though wealth could bargain with fate. In Venice, special isolation houses were built on the outer islands, a word that would eventually give us quarantine from the Italian 40 giorni, or 40 days. This was the period ships had to remain anchored before passengers were allowed ashore. The noble passengers stayed in appointed luxury, away from the filth of the lower decks, but isolated all the same. And yet, despite all these measures, many of the elite still fell ill. The plague was no respecter of titles. Kings, queens, dukes, and bishops, all were vulnerable. Wealth delayed the danger, it did not remove it. Still, the contrasting experiences remained stark. A peasant might sleep on a straw mat beside the dying. A plague doctor might collapse in a narrow room, his mask damp with breath. But the noble, swaddled in perfumed silks, behind locked gates, sipped wine and waited, for news, for safety, for silence. As we drift now to the end of our journey, let us reflect on these separations, on how society responded not as one, but in layers, some wading through suffering, others stepping carefully around it. Let us now turn gently to the closing of our story, a soft return to the present and a moment of stillness.